This week on It's Clear as Mud, we are investigating some tricks and techniques around shaping and understanding shrinkage in pottery. We will also look at note-taking nomenclature for recording our ideas and designs, and all of this in prep for a deep dive into shaping pots and pottery design in the next few videos. Hi, I'm Jeff Patterson. Welcome to It's Clear as Mud. This is my pottery YouTube channel, and I'm hoping you'll find it interesting today. If you do, I'm really trying to make this channel happen. I am trying to get into the algorithm, trying to get the information that I have out, and hoping that other people think that it's a contribution and it's helpful to them. So if you can help push me out there by doing one of the above, then boy, that I would certainly be appreciative. Today, we're going to look at some things that I want to deal with before we move on to the next videos. I had a request from someone to show them how to shape the cylinders that I have cylinder drills. If you haven't seen my earlier videos, I have a cylinder drill it's designed around production, but the fact of the matter is it's a great beginning drill. It's kind of like doing scales on a guitar or anything where you have an opportunity to practice under a regimen and develop some real initial skills that will carry you on further. So if you haven't done it yet, I would really recommend going back and looking at the earlier tapes, my first few tapes that kind of break down what I'm asking you to do. That being said, some people want to see how those things are shaped now, and I want to go into a design series. So I want to teach you how to design pottery and understand kind of the elements of design. And so we're going to do some things today that are going to lead towards understanding how to shape pottery and how to design pottery. But these are some technical skills that I think you need to have, and some things that you also need to be able to do to kind of effectively design, to be able to remember what you're doing and what you've achieved and what you're trying to do. So the first thing we're going to look at is shrinkage. And what I want you to do is get a ball of the clay that you're using. Shrinkage is a mini splendored thing in that the moisture content of the clay affects shrinkage. How thin the clay is or thick the clay is affects shrinkage. The type of clay affects shrinkage. So you're going to have to do one of these tests for every different type of clay and every different type of firing that you do. So this clay is going to shrink. This is Laguna B-Mix. And so it's going to shrink completely different if I was to use Laguna B-Mix with grog and use it for raku, which I probably wouldn't recommend, but if I did. Or in my classroom, I have people that do low fire work on Laguna B-Mix. So they're using B-Mix without grog, and they're burnishing it, and they're pit firing it, and doing all those things. You're going to get different shrinkage rates all the way through that, and that's worth understanding. So the first thing you need to do is take a piece of clay and make it in the density and the clay that you like working with, and flatten it out so that you've got something that's kind of the approximate thickness of a good thick pot. And then we're going to take a rib and we're going to mark across the top of that with the metal rib. I like that nice thin crisp line. And then we're going to use millimeters. I can hear you all groaning out there now. Millimeters in this instance work like money. So if you can take $1 and think of $1 as 100 millimeters, or 100 millimeters as each millimeter is a penny, equaling $1, then if I was to ask you what's 12% of $1, you'd go, hey, 12 cents, and you'd be right on. And so that's how easy it is when you're working with millimeters instead of working with standard measurements and decimals and decimals of an inch. That will drive you crazy. Not only that, but if you're in a place where you can ask your phone, if you have a smartphone, you can ask your smartphone, what's 12% of 128, and it'll give it to you. Some gal will come on and tell you the exact measurement. So remember to use your smartphones if you have them. So what we're going to do is we're going to come on here, we're going to mark off 100 millimeters on this piece of clay. I'm going to be very precise about it. And then what we'll do is we'll set this aside, put this aside someplace, and we'll let it dry. And then when it's when it's bone dry, we're going to bring it back and look at it, and we're going to write some things on it with a pencil. And what we're going to write is what is the millimeter working that we're working with here. So we're working with 100 millimeters. We're going to write that down, and we're going to write down that it's Laguna B-Mix, and we're going to write down that we're firing it to cone 6. So that's the temperature we're at. Now, these items up here, the PTY and the 060123 are the nomenclature that I'm teaching you, and it's a system I've used forever on how to keep notes. So the PTY doesn't usually go on here, but it stands for page, test, and year. So the first two numbers on here are the page in the book you're keeping your notes. The second two numbers are the test numbers. So this would be the first test, 02 would be the second test, and so on. And then 23 is the year you're keeping the test, or you're doing the test. So I use these composition books, and I think they're great. They're durable, they're cheap, 50 to 25 cents. They have lines on them. You can get them without lines for design books. They're stitched together, so there's stitching in there. So in opposition to a spiral-bound notebook, 30 years from now, here's a 30-year-old composition notebook, and it's still hanging together. And that's one I went through grad school with. And so they're really, really durable. I only use pencil. If you use ink in this, or a ballpoint pen, what you'll find out is that in a pottery studio, ballpoint pens crap out on you really fast because of all the dust and grit. And if things get wet, which they almost always seem to do, I don't know why I spill coffee on everything, but I do, or drop it in a puddle of water, or knock it into the sink, or whatever. If you do that with ink, it runs all over the place. If you do that with pencil, the pencil stays put. And you can come back later on and you can make corrections and additions, and you can modify things up and change them. So the first thing you want to do with your book is you want to go through and you want to number every page in the book. Go through the entire book and number all the pages so that you know they're in sequence, you know they're in order, and they're accurate. So we're going to start with page 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And so here's page 6, which is correlating with page 6 on our test tile. So we're going to go up to the top of the page, and we're going to write B-Mix Cone 6 Shrinkage Test, because that's what we're doing. And if it's a glaze or anything else, you always give it a title so that you know exactly what you're looking at. If I'm working on somebody else's glaze, very often I'll give them credit. So, it'll be a Patrick Horsley glaze or something like that. And then the first test, 060123, is wet clay at 100 millimeters. And then what we're going to do is we're going to let this dry. So you're going to set it out in the sun and let it dry, or not set it out in the sun. Just set it someplace and let it go bone dry. You don't want it to warp. And then we're going to look at it. We're going to put our ruler up there and realize that it's now no longer 100 millimeters. It's 94 millimeters. So we're going to make the second notation, do our second test, 060223, bone dry at 94 millimeters. Now we have two more things we have to do with this, and we don't have the information yet. We have to bisque this, and we're going to run it through a bisque load, and we're going to come back and measure it again and determine what the shrinkage is at bisque. So maybe the shrinkage will be like 92 at bisque. And then we're going to fire it to cone 6 and come back again and make a measurement at cone 6 and find out what it is. So when we have that information, we'll add it. We don't want to be afraid to not use the entire page. Come back in, and if you have notes like there's seems to be some pocketing or there's a severe amount of warpage, it's way off centered, anything that you notice about the clay, continue to make those notes. And not only if there's changes in the clay later on or changes in the glaze constituents later on, you can start making some adjustments and start looking at having that information. Not the thing is that later on you're going to forget. You're not going to remember what you've done. You're not going to remember the information unless you write it down, and that's really important. Another bit of record keeping that you want to do is you want to keep a book of your designs. And I've had this book forever. I wish this was a composition notebook, but it's not, because it's fallen apart. And even though it's stitched together, it was something that I could find that had blank pages in it that I could continue to work with. What I use this for is I keep notes and scribbles and ideas of the projects that I'm working on. So here's one that I wanted to show you. This is a self-watering slug-resistant planter that I designed many, many years ago and made a lot of them. It's slug-resistant because it has a little copper wire that's let into it and set into the body of the pot. It's up off the ground so slugs can't live underneath it. And it's designed to sit on a reservoir, a water reservoir, and have a wick run through the drain hole, and that wick brings water up from the reservoir underneath and waters the plant inside. Now, when I was selling these, I was selling these at garden centers and nurseries, and I wanted them to be able to insert a plastic plant that was already planted, like a geranium or something, and be able to sell that as a package deal, as an enticement to people to buy not only a plant but a planter at the same time. And so what I did was I went and got the standard plastic inserts, I mean, not inserts, but planters that people in nurseries use to start their plants. And I adjusted those for shrinkage so that when I threw these, they would fit in. They would be below the rim, and they would fit in nice and snugly, and they would do it every single time. So I got the plastic planter, and I made adjustments so it would fit inside. And then I calculated the size that I needed and how many pounds. I kept notes of the pounds of the weight and all of that going into what this planter was, so that I could adjust the shrinkage again and again and again. And if I had like three sizes of these, and so I had to keep them separate and understand the weight and the shrinkage for each one. And then, of course, you can set up your gauge and when you're throwing, and later on, and dial them in and just go all day long making the same planter. That was a real need to have definite control on my shrinkage. The other thing about shrinkage is you make a teapot and you want to be able to replace the lid for a client. They break the lid, they can send you a millimeter measurement of the diameter of what's there. You can go backwards and calculate what it was originally before shrinkage, and then you can dial in what you have to have in order to have a lid that fits and make them a new lid. And then the other thing that I do in my book, like with this, I love my T-spouts. I've worked on these T-spouts for years, and they have a certain shape, and they're extruded, and they don't drip, and I want to make them the same, so I keep notes on things like, outline for my T-spout. So I can take this, and I have a template on here, and I can draw that template on newspaper and take my extruded T-spouts and lay them out over and over and over again. And I couldn't do that if I didn't have those notes in here. So really important note-taking. Another thing that you might want to consider in your note-taking, especially when you're working with glazes. So like these are glazes, a series of glazes that I did in 2019, and they're all in series, and they would be each an line item in my note-taking, and but you come back and take a photograph of these. Put a piece of paper in there that has the number of them on there, so you can take a photograph and be able to tie that photograph to your notebook, because I ended up having like a refrigerator box full of tiles that I ended up throwing when we moved, and I wish I had all those photographs, but back in the day that wasn't available, and it's available to you. So another thing that I do, and this is we're going to wind this up here pretty quick, is I make these little templates. And the templates work on something like making a lidded bowl or making like this juicer. I have these templates that tell me what the inside diameter of the juicer is supposed to be as I'm throwing it, and the outside diameter of the juicer is supposed to be. And I can even round this off. I have some of these that are rounded off, like this is one for the bowl. It's rounded off, so I can shove that inside the bowl and press the clay up against this and get that exact measurement each time for my lid. And then I have another one for the lid, which is slightly smaller, and it allows me to come in and make all the this articulation inside the lid that's going to fit inside the juicer every time. Now, something like this juicer, I've made a spout on it, so I've distorted the top. It's got some shrinkage. It's got a little wonk to it, and so that lid has to be have a certain amount of slack in it, or it's gonna get stuck in there and it's not gonna fit well. And the other thing that's really nice about this is that if you're doing production work and you're selling 20 of these to a client, it's nice to have them be able to unpack it and have this lid fit all 20 of them, and vice versa. So that's a real plus. And again, with this, if somebody breaks the lid, they can send my business or the person who purchased it from the business I'm dealing with can write me and say, hey, I need a new lid for my juicer, and I can just pick one off the shelf and send it to them because it will fit. Well, I hope you find that helpful. That's just kind of some real basic stuff that you need to understand before we get into the designing of pottery. Shrinkage and lid fitting and those kind of considerations are quite significant, as well as with the size of your posts in your kiln. Does your pottery fit in your kiln? I've often made pottery that doesn't. Or one of the things that I really recommend people do is choose your boxes, pick your shipping arrangement, and design to your posts and design to your boxes so that you get your pottery the appropriate size to fit into a box and be able to economically ship it. Stuff that most people just don't think about, especially if you're recycling boxes. You just use what you can get. But it's much more economical to do it other ways. Okay, if this has been helpful, please give me some sort of feedback and help me with the algorithm one way or the other. Either subscribe or like or something, and continue to try and push me into the place where more people are seeing the fruits of my labor here. Thank you for dropping by, and here's Mud in Your Eye.